Hello, and welcome to a special edition of the Renegade Pop Culture Podcast. This is your host, Keona, and with me today I have Jacob.
Hello, everybody.
And we have two very special guests today, the author of Console Wars and also the co-director of the documentary on CBS All Access, also called Console Wars. We have Blake J. Harris.
Hey, Keona and Jacob. Thanks for having us on.
And we have the co-director of Console Wars, the documentary on CBS All Access, which is Jonah Tulis.
Hey, how's it going?
All right, and thank you guys for coming on. We really appreciate it. So, just to start us off, I kind of want to get into the birth, if you will, of Console Wars, the documentary, and sort of where it came from. So, Blake and Jonah, could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it's funny. So Blake, this is over nearly 9 years ago. About 8 years ago, Blake came to me. He's like, I think I found this interesting story. I don't know what it is. We've been writing partners for years, developed ideas together. He's like, I have this interesting story. It's about, Sega taking on Nintendo. There's just something there. There's nothing out there on it. There's something there. I really think it's interesting. And I looked at it. I was like, this is really interesting. And, the more, he had just started scratching the surface, but I was like, you know what? This is like The Social Network or, it could be a documentary too. There's so much great media. And we kind of both had the idea. It was like, you know what? Let's just try all three of those. Let's try to make a movie, a documentary, and a book. And if one of those turns out, we're in great shape. So, time went on. We developed it further with our manager, Julian Rosenberg, the project as a whole, and took it to Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, who we have a relationship with. And kind of for the first time in our careers, after that 2-hour meeting, they were like, yeah, we're on board. We're going to, help Blake with the book. We're going to help finance and produce the doc, and we're going to try to make this a movie. And
awesome.
We
I'm
were
so looking forward to that.
It was insane. It was the most insane moment of our lives. It was like in the same day, this life-changing thing. Again, then it was, lots of years of complicated developments. We set up the movie version at Sony Pictures. Scott Rudin came on as an excellent producer, produced The Social Network, actually.
Yes.
During this process, which is I believe it was a 2-year option period, they decided it'd be better as a TV series, which, long-form TV had really evolved at the time in the middle of the 2010s. And we agreed. We were like, you know what? We want more Tom, more Al. You could have entire episodes that occur in Japan. You could do so many amazing things as a TV series. So we were excited about that. And then throughout this process, the doc got delayed because it was so tied in with the IP and there's financing involved. The book came out to great success. And then eventually we landed the whole project at Legendary Pictures and CBS All Access. And, now CBS All Access' first original doc. And, we're developing the TV series further. It's really exciting. First original doc from Legendary Pictures as well.
I noticed that. Yeah, I did notice that. Yeah, Legendary usually just does features or just like a lot of action movies and a lot of comic
they're doing the
movies.
recent Godzilla series, the King Kong and Godzilla crossover movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's great.
They do
That's
some
awesome.
bigger TV too. They do some bigger TV like Lost in Space. They have Carnival Row on Amazon. They're a huge
company.
Studio.
Yeah.
I think it's really just a credit to this story. It's certainly not because of us, but of course it's the access that we were able to get and how we ended up telling it. But there's just something special about the Sega Nintendo battle. For those who lived through it, there's a nostalgia factor. For those who like the business angle, it's just this incredible, unparalleled business story. There's so much human element to it. For the gaming industry, it just chronicles this Wild West era that evolved from that into so much more of what we have today. And so, every step of the way, we realize how fortunate we are that someone like Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg are willing to work with us, and that Legendary is willing to make an exception, and CBS is willing to make an exception. And it's just because of this incredible story that every time we've talked about it and pitched it, people have been as enthusiastic about it as we are.
Yeah. I was born in 1993, just 1 year kind of slapped out in the middle of this console wars thing. I think the closest Sega product I had was the Sega Pico, that little thing that was for babies. And even I felt nostalgic watching this. I felt that sense of nostalgia. I felt that sentimentality about this whole thing. So
That's
yeah,
awesome.
I just really enjoyed this documentary just in general. It really engaged me. I thought you guys did a great job of getting me hooked as a non-gamer, really. Really getting me involved in this story. And it was exhilarating. It really was.
part of the point was to sort of make a story for anybody, you know, a compelling story. Because, you know, we even used to say, you know, if Tom
Absolutely.
Kalinske was running a paper towel company or a tissue company, the story would be that compelling. He'd still be going down to Arkansas to get them into Walmart. He'd still be running aggressive ad campaigns against competition. And he'd still have that team of misfits who's pushing along the way. And add in the fact that this was, you know, two of the most iconic companies of the 90s. And you really see that why it's such an interesting story for us. Plus, we love that era. I know you didn't get to experience that much of it, Jacob, but that era was a special time. You know, you look back at the footage, and you see Hulk Hogan, you see Vanna White, you see all these like magical people from that era, and you see the haircuts that the newscaster has, and it just brings you back.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you, I was born in 1981, so I don't really look it, but I was, and like the being around that battle between the two titans, and just like knowing that Nintendo, the NES was my first video game console, actually. So looking back on it and just imagining, like, you know, sort of reimagining what it was like back then, with Sega being the upstart and sort of the scrappy one, and Nintendo just being the top dog and sort of on top of everything. It was so interesting to me because I became more of a Sega fan, and actually the game that got me really into video games as I grew a little bit older was Streets of Rage 2.
Yeah, great.
So like that game, for some reason, it just captured my imagination, and I was like, okay, I want to see more of this. For me, Sega was sort of formative, even I think more so than Nintendo in a way, because like although I love Super Mario Brothers, I mean, who didn't? It was, you know, you could clearly see the delineation between Sega and Nintendo, and then plus they had all those ads. The marketing for Sega was just amazing, like Tom Kalinske and his team, Al Nielsen, and everybody that I read the book. I devoured that book, Blake. It was just like, my God. And, you know, the whole time that I was reading it, because I was such a Sega fan back in the day, I was like waiting for the other shoe to drop, and I just had this sense of dread. Like it was going so well for Tom and everybody. And I was just like, even reading it now, even knowing what happened, I was still going, oh my God, this is going to get bad. It made me emotional. It really did.
Look, you're preaching to the choir. I mean, I'm glad that it resonated with you that way, especially because it was a character-driven story.
Yeah.
And you get inside these people's heads. But like, I'll admit, I was crying when, like, literally crying when I wrote the final chapter. You know, part because I couldn't believe it was ending. You know, that I'd finished this, but part like what could have been. There's so many ways that the story could have gone, and it's so sad.
Yeah,
that it ended the way that it did.
Funny, people say that Nintendo beat Sega in this, but you know, when you really look at it, it was Sega Japan who sort of undermined them and sort of ended the run they had.
Yes.
Here's what interested me most about the structure of this documentary, because it did kind of start off as a David and Goliath story in a way. It started off, you know, Sega's, you know, it's the underdog, you know, it's more of scrappy, and how, you know, they were the first ones to really confront Nintendo, to really be a threat to them. You know, it was like kind of like that. It was kind of like, it was easy to root for them, but then you went back, you show the origins of Nintendo, how they started off as a card company and then they became this huge empire. So at first it looked like you were taking sides on this sort of thing, but it turned out you kind of weren't, and then you kind of revealed in the end that it was Sony that kind of won the overall the next console war. How Sony kind of stabbed Nintendo in the back after they tried to make their own CD-based console, and you know, I liked that. It was more of a celebration of video games in general rather than just taking a side to this sort of war, which it seemed like everyone had to do at that time.
Well, I think the really dynamic and interesting part about sort of why we told the story that way was because I don't think a lot of people knew, like us, that Nintendo was operating like this. You know, had antitrust regulations, and you know, they're the people who spoke to us, they even said why they did that. And I think a big part of the reason we structured the film like that was, first, we're going to show you a little bit of the Nintendo, you know, which is the magical Nintendo with Howard Phillips leading the way. Then we're going to introduce this new player, Sega, and how they're going to take on this Goliath. And then we introduce Goliath, who, as they really were, these sharp businessmen, and how, you know, and then once you get on Sega's side, it's important to know that these guys were David themselves, and they were fighting their own Goliath and the death of the entire industry, and had their own battle ahead of them. And hopefully that justifies some of the controlling things they did because of that.
And we, in that respect, I think we also, to a degree, wanted to replicate our own experiences with Sega and Nintendo. We very intentionally wanted the first 5 minutes of the film, which is, largely a montage of the history of the gaming, to reflect the childlike wonder that we felt growing up and opening Christmas gifts and thinking of Nintendo as this happy, smiley, awesome, Willy Wonka-esque company. And then as we actually started doing the research and saw, they were in antitrust litigations, they used to threaten retailers, they were not very kind to third-party developers, they strong-armed other game magazine companies, and that was the Sega perspective that we're hearing, as well as just the historical litigation records. They were sort of the bad guy, and that was until we started finally getting interviews with the Nintendo people, and we at least saw their side of the story. And so we thought that our experience going through that was really eye-opening, and kind of wanted to express it that way as well, because it is really fascinating that there's it's certainly a David and Goliath story. I mean, when you go from 5% of the market to 55%, when no one says that you can even get 10%, that's a huge victory. But it also, as much as it feels like heroes and villains, that I don't think there's a villain in the story. I see both sides' heroes' perspective.
Yeah.
We do we do at one point, you might have noticed, even shed light on, is Tom a good guy or is he a bad guy? Later on in the film, you kind of say, is he just sort of, George Harrison says it best, the music man going from town to town? Mm-hmm. I mean, I wouldn't say that, but it's important to look at it from that perspective and say, okay, maybe he's just, the best salesman. And, again, I don't agree with that, but I think it's important to open up that door.
And I think that also just says a lot about marketing in general. Goodby says it well, where he says, if you think of, so you tell someone you're a filmmaker, they think of the best movie. You tell someone you're an author, they think of a good book. When you tell someone you're in marketing, they think of the worst ad that they've seen. And just the way that we think of marketing and advertising as dirty words, and that's understandable. It's because of the big corporations throwing a lot of money at advertisements in a lot of ways. But marketing too is about messaging, and it's about how you want your customer to feel. And so in terms of Tom, he does go into town and make people feel a certain way. Mm-hmm. And you could make the case that feeling that your identity should not be formed by transactional money you spend, but also at the same time, we all join tribes in certain ways, and we all yearn for a sense of belonging, and that was something that Sega very consciously provided. So that was what made it really fun for us as storytellers to sort of confront what marketing was and meet the men and women behind the scenes that were pulling those levers and really try to see it in the good ways and the bad ways.
And it's interesting to see how Sega started off with the Sega Scream, and they kind of, they came back at Nintendo with blast processing and all that stuff. And then you see and Welcome to the Next Level, which was awesome. That was a great ad campaign. I still remember it to this day. And then Nintendo came back with Play It Loud. And that was just even for me, for someone who had a Genesis and who was a Sega person, and also had an NES and had a Super NES, I mean, that got me to go out and buy Donkey Kong Country.
See, that's awesome to hear you say that, because that was one that Jonah and I really struggled with in the film, because in terms of Nintendo's culture and their identity, Play It Loud was such a big departure and
it was
equivalent of selling out. But at the same time, it was effective. They did boost around 1994, so we wanted to portray it as them losing their way. Yeah. But also at the same time say, but they, it wasn't exactly bad. So, I think we're very happy with the balance that we struck, but good to hear that it even worked for you.
Yeah, Donkey Kong Country was also such a good game that I feel that helped push it a lot. But if you look back at, in the archival, you have sort of Don Coiner go up there and say the sweaty nipples and butthole surfers of the music. And you see their ad campaign is Haka Loogie at life. It's hard to think of that in a what marketing geniuses. But when he was up there and he said butthole surfers and sweaty nipples, I was just like, oh my goodness, that must have been
shots fired.
That is the best. That must have been the best moment in Nintendo's history up to that point.
I love how they didn't even try to be diplomatic there.
That was actually crazy when you think about it. They departed in that one presentation. They departed so much. They said, we're going to have the blood in Mortal Kombat, where they admitted to being down and out. And they basically introduced a, good BS type of ad campaign. That's those are huge steps for a company that doesn't change, you know?
Yeah, that was them evolving with the times, I felt.
Yeah. It's also like interesting to think about it in terms of, you know, part of the reason, you know, one of the other reasons we structured the film the way we did is because Nintendo was not very responsive. You know, for a lot of time, they sort of just ignored the problem of Sega, which wouldn't have made it back and forth because Nintendo was just like, oh, we're not going to fourth. And as you know, I'm sure it's happened to all of us in life, when you sort of ignore the problem, eventually you have to pay the price. And when you do, you sort of pay it in a worse way than if you just gradually done it. And that's how you end up with sweaty nipples and butthole surfers, as opposed to more of a gradual reframing of your identity. But they were like, almost like, all right, we throw in the white flag. We're just going to try to, you know, turn into Sega at this point.
Yeah. I love in the documentary too how you have like a lot of the Sega people just kind of respond to that with just like, well, they became us.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah, I mean, it's true. I have to say that it was pretty cool too that you guys actually started the documentary off with Ralph Baer.
Yeah.
You know, like the father of video games, and him just saying like, this is going to become a moneymaker in the future, and everybody was just like, oh sure. You know, and then of course it becomes this huge multi-billion-dollar industry. And
yeah, they even say at the end that it's the video game industry is worth more than the film and music industries combined. And so that's pretty amazing once you start thinking about like, wow, like it hasn't been around nearly as long as film and music, and yet it's worth this much. It's just absolutely insane to me.
And it's not slowing down with the pre-order fiascos that we just saw too over the past week.
And that was some of the backdrop too for the writing of the book in terms of style and how we wanted to tell the story with the documentary, because like I talked about in the past that early on for me, I remember it must have been around the time that John and I first talked about this, and he had the idea to do the documentary, like going to a Barnes and Noble and just being shocked that there was a that there was a film history section and a music history section, but there was no video game history section, and there wasn't even a video game history book in the entire Barnes and Noble.
Really?
So, you know, there was a few that had been written, like some great ones, like Stephen Kent's.
Stephen Kent. Yeah, I have that one.
Yeah. First person to write a book about the history of video games. But just that in terms of the fact that this medium was so much more successful, or not so much more, but it was becoming more successful and was obviously, you know, could go toe-to-toe with film and music. And yet you had hundreds of books on those subjects and nothing really commercially accessible for video games. We really wanted to tell a story that could be accessed by anyone, whether you love gaming or whether you didn't know enough about gaming, so that it could be sort of that gateway drug to like get you into this world.
That's kind of like you became marketers yourselves.
It's a great point. It's a really good point. And we learned a lot of lessons from these people directly, because, you know, it was easy for us to see ourselves as Sega. We were no-name filmmakers, just like they were no-name companies, and they believed that they had a good product and they had the right team and that they were in the right place at the right time and able to leverage the marketing skills to get themselves out there and try to help get their story known or get their product known.
And we're kind of seeing a similar war right now with streaming, with different streaming platforms like Netflix and Hulu and CBS All Access, even Disney Plus, and lest we forget Quibi. Outrageous success that is Quibi. That's definitely not going to be sold anytime soon. It's interesting. Like, can you imagine like a documentary in the future tackling the streaming wars?
100%. Yeah. I mean, I think that it's a similar thing where these companies are doing battle. They're killing each other off, but they're also making the other companies, you know, work harder to create better content for the consumer, so that you know, people are. You know, we have such great shows on the air because Amazon was trying to figure out what Netflix was doing, and then Hulu was doing the same thing. And, you know, when you look back at it, it all started, you know, you had House of Cards, and, you know, it's okay. All the sudden streamers make
show, or or House of Cards that it started.
Both of them.
I'd love to see.
The composer of the doc, by the way, did House of Cards, the music and the theme. Our composer Jeff Beal, he's incredible. If you really, if you do a second watch, really pay attention to music. It's
very cool,
really
very
special,
cool.
Really special.
Yeah, the music is awesome. Yeah, and any movie that has or documentary that has block rocket beats in it, I'm just like, I'm there.
I was say CBS All Access. They're even trying to correct themselves, trying to move forward in the streaming business by CBS. They originally merged with Viacom, and soon CBS All Access will be known as Paramount Plus. So
Paramount Plus, yeah.
Yeah, that is kind of it's an interesting step in the right direction. It's like they're finally trying to be taken seriously in this field, and I hope they're successful. I hope that this is a necessary step. You know what I mean? So we can get more cool documentaries like this.
I'm glad that they're going in the direction of original programming too. Like having your documentary on there too is really like that's a great thing. I mean, you look at Netflix; they have documentaries out the wazoo. So, we need more of that.
CBS has
kind
been
of
great.
content as
CBS
well.
has been great. They kind of really let us make the film we wanted to make. It wasn't as the studio that is intrusive like in TV and film as you hear about. They let us make our own film, and they're really putting a lot of marketing behind it. I'll be going on a website and I'll see a banner for Console Wars. I'm like, wow, like this is a documentary. This is great to see.
And
It's a great visual too. Like Console Wars, that's going to grab some people's eyes. You know what I mean? Like especially those who did not live through that.
They've done an excellent job with the marketing, and like I think a good indicator of what it's like to work with them and why they have, why they're gonna seemingly be able to bring other great content under their umbrella is like Jonah and I. We had already sold the film rights, the film and TV rights to CBS All Access with Legendary, and so this TV show was going to be there, and it was unclear if we were going to be able to finish the documentary. And we met with them, and we were told, the best case scenario of this meeting was that it would start a long dialogue that maybe one day would lead to them doing the documentary or letting us finish this thing we've been working on.
But they'd never done it before.
Yeah, because they'd never done it before. And like even if they were like, yeah, we love it, what are we supposed to do? And to their credit, within 24 hours, they loved it, and they got back to us, and their response is the response that you always want to hear from any partner in any walk of life, where it's like, let's just figure it out. Like let's not let precedent get in the way. Let's try something new because we think there's something cool here. And, those are the people you want to work with. And that was very Netflix's mentality to help get them on the map. And so, I'm very bullish on Paramount Plus / CBS All Access. Have only good things to say about our experience with them.
Yeah, I mean, Legendary had brought in, we had already shot, had a rough cut of the film, and Legendary brought in Doug Blush, who is, top editor in the field, has edited 3 Academy Award winning docs. He was our supervising editor and a producer, and he basically saw it and was like, oh, there's something here. We got this. This is a home run. And sort of that he was really instrumental in pushing it forward so that a big studio like that would get involved with a project that, is under, the hundreds of millions of dollars they spend on TV shows and film.
The editing in that is very, very, very cool. Like I love the little animated sequences too. Those were really great. And of course, like we said, the music is just top notch. I think that one of the things that I saw in the book and the documentary was the fact that, Goodby had gotten the marketing contract basically for Sega at the time to do Welcome to the Next Level. And I remember reading in the book how, that was kind of approached where it was like, okay, they came up with Welcome to the Next Level as their catchphrase, but they didn't have anything else. And Tom and everybody they seemed to be really set on the other marketing company that had done Nike, I believe it was. And and so and reading that in the book and seeing like the kind of gamer speak that they came up with, and I was like, oh, if this had gone through, I don't know, like seriously, like I'm glad that they did not choose it, because that would have been a disaster, I feel.
Yeah, it would have been too niche.
My gosh. Not that, not to put any shade towards anybody or anything like that, not to throw shade on anybody, but it's just that like you could tell
that was what's great about this era. That back then you liked something and it didn't mean that you disliked the thing that you weren't choosing. Like you could like Sega and it didn't mean, oh, I hate Nintendo. No, I just like Sega more. I like Nintendo more.
Yeah.
And Goodby was better than Wieden and Kennedy, and certainly an upgrade from the Bozell-Jacobs relationship that they had.
Yes.
And they were
absolutely.
local. Goodby was also a local agency, and that's something they wanted. They were in San Francisco. And, there's one clip we could never figure out how to get it into the sequence. We had versions of it, but it always felt like a departure. Whereas part of their pitch, they hit golf balls off of off of the roof of their headquarters, and you'd see them hitting the Sega doors in the
That
in
is
the pits.
great.
And it was like, oh, we're just swing away.
And I loved I just loved how when they showed how bitter the rivalry gets to. Like, do you believe the conspiracy that Nintendo gave Sega games to the Senate to show them how violent they could be? Because that was kind of...
Yes, I think 100% that was the case.
I bet they did.
And they were pretty close with their Slade Gordon was their local senator, and they were pretty close at the time because they were about to lose the Seattle Mariners, and this was a storyline that sadly got cut from the movie, but they were about to buy this. They were about to lose the Seattle Mariners, and Slade Gordon convinced Howard Lincoln and Arakawa to get Nintendo to buy the team, and they did, and they had that relationship with the Senators, and it's almost a certainty that they sent the videos.
Yeah, I mean, Howard Lincoln said essentially as much in our interview with him, but it was in response to a question, so it wouldn't have made sense for us to include it there. But we probably wouldn't have included Tom suggesting and Ellen Beth suggesting the conspiracy theory if we didn't know that there was credible evidence to back that.
Right.
Yeah. Professional.
Well, it seems like they were playing politics basically at the time, and I think that was, it was kind of in their best interest to do so. Because they were really trying to they were saying what they were saying was not untrue. They were like, hey, we censored this stuff, and that's kind of what you're calling for, and we would never have Night Trap on one of our systems. So it was just looking back at Night Trap now and looking back at Mortal Kombat now, it's just like, wow, that have any of these guys ever played Last of Us 2? Because that would probably give them heart palpitations. But
well, that's why it's funny to see them arguing so seriously in a congressional hearing about this, because they're arguing like this is the end of the world, and and in fact this is nothing compared with what's to come. But it did help. It did force the rating system to go forward. So there was a purpose to this, and the rating system is something we need and still need.
Yeah, and it's interesting in a couple of regards. One is that Howard Lincoln did say we'll never have a game like Night Trap on our system, and they released it on the Switch 3 years ago.
Yes.
So
what was the game?
Night Trap.
Night Trap.
They had that on the Nintendo Switch?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, but it wasn't super popular. But it shows that Nintendo has loosened their belt a little bit. Yeah. And then also, to Jonah's point, I think most people, regardless of your political affiliation, don't like the idea of government regulation in different industries. But I think that seemingly a case of government working for all of us is that it caused the self-regulation. So they didn't end up moving forward, but their threat of doing so led to Sega and Nintendo having to work with each other and figure this out. And I think that there's little dispute that was a good thing for us all, that the creation of the ESRB.
Yes. And I think that it was, I think that a lot of the credit too seems to go to Kalinsky and everybody at Sega, because it just seemed like that was something that he really wanted to get out ahead of. And it's
real irony. We weren't able to get that much into it in the movie, but Howard Lincoln was correct that they would never put violent games like that on the Nintendo system, so that they maybe needed a rating system, but Sega already had a rating system. So the net result of the hearings was Sega already had a rating system.
I remember that. I remember the old Mortal Kombat 2. Yeah, I remember the old Mortal Kombat 2 box that had the MA-17 or whatever on it. And so it's it was nice it was a good thing to see them work together and develop to make the ESRB come to life, basically, and to have an industry-wide standard for all that does to help people. I mean, I have worked in retail selling games, and I've had multiple people and grandparents and parents who come up to me and just are gonna buy this, buy Grand Theft Auto, Call of Duty for their little 7-year-old, and I'm just are you sure?
What?
Yeah, I mean, are you really sure you want to do this? But
they're the kind of people who would bring their 7-year-old to see Joker.
Yeah.
Which is look, if they want to do it.
But hey.
Right. But all the ESRB does, and why I think it's great, some people say it's censorship. It's not. It's just, it's a
not.
You the grandma could say, that's fine. Yeah, let's get this violent 7-year-old. Okay. But like, at least they're aware that
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
what's in the
At
game.
least, you
More
know, yeah, at least the guide is there so you can say like, well, this is what you got.
Exactly.
But anyway, yeah, I mean, I really think that it's interesting to see how the industry has turned from that. Like it seems to have made that hard left into basically whatever, just the violence and everything that's gone into games now. But it seemed to be something that like maybe a lot of people, especially back then, did not want to really deal with. Like perhaps they not that they didn't want to deal with it, but just that like that was something that they didn't really want to have in their games. Like Kalinsky kind of wanted to, not really have that on a Genesis game, and Howard Lincoln and everybody at Nintendo certainly didn't want to add to that sort of content.
Right.
But I don't know what I was really going with
No,
there.
but I
anyway.
think maybe part of what you're getting at, that you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that there was a sense of corporate responsibility. That Sega and Nintendo dealt with it in different ways, but the way that Tom proactively wanted to have a rating system, or at least was willing to work with Nintendo eventually after the Senate hearings, like that's very different than the much more than what happens in like the social media companies today, where they have much more of a libertarian, do whatever you want. We're just the platform provider here attitude. And, Tom or Howard Lincoln could have had that attitude as well. And maybe some people would prefer it, but the majority of people seem to prefer some sort of sense of responsibility, or at least trying to do something before it gets too late, where I think it feels like too late with social media and other industries.
And not to say that you can't have violence in video games or anything like that, because I think that you can. But I mean, obviously, I love Last of Us 2. I love Final Fantasy VII Remake. So, I mean, it's just like, I love Donkey Kong Country and I love Streets of Rage 2. It's like you can have both, but at least there was a guide to where parents could say like, okay, maybe I don't want this in my house for my kid or something. But like, it was really interesting too to see like and to meet all these people that I didn't really know about back when I was just a kid playing the Genesis and playing the Super NES and stuff, and seeing like more of Howard Lincoln, more of Tom Kalinske, because I knew of them from reading magazines at the time, but I didn't know anything about Al Nielsen. I didn't know anything really about. I knew a little bit about Howard Phillips, but not too much. Bill White, Ellen Beth Van Buskirk, and everybody that was involved with the creation of Sonic and all that. Let's talk about that, because that was like a huge thing. Sonic versus Mario. So you had like mall tours going on for Sonic and everything, because I lived in Hawaii when I was a kid, so I did not see any mall tours, obviously. But like, we just, it's such an interesting time, because that's the kind of thing where I don't think you would see that now, except maybe virtually. Like just handing out demos on PlayStation Network or what have you. But
I think the marketing now is obviously much more targeted, using, the web and phones and Instagram and Facebook. Back then, it was like you had to go on the ground where the kids were. And where were the kids? They were in malls. They were in, this is where they were. And that's how you got to the kids. And, you set up demos and you got people excited, and then you got them to get their parents to get excited, and, get to the older brother to get to the younger kid, that was the strategy. And with Sonic, they knew they had something special. They developed this. There was Al Nielsen was a big part, obviously, Madeline as well, who's not on the doc. And it was Sega put something on their plate, and it's funny, you see some of the other options, and could you imagine if they went with the egg instead of Sonic? They went with that weird egg guy. Like, where would we be today? There'd be this egg moving around kind of fast. I can't picture that egg going slow, going fast. So maybe this slow egg going through, green zone.
Now even Sonic was supposed to have a girlfriend named Madonna.
Yeah. I mean,
they were like, we can't use that name here.
Yeah, Shinobu was even like, what are we doing here? And then the Rock Band, and they kind of came and they smoothed them out for American audiences, and again, giving them away with the system was a big part of it as well, to make sure that every system had Sonic with it. So by having a Genesis, you had Sonic already.
Yeah.
And it was cool when they debuted Sonic the Hedgehog 2. They said they were going to debut it as if it was a movie, kind of like a big event, and just like having all these different venues and all these different, like these big on stage. And they had teenage celebrities introduce these
They
games.
literally got every teenage star from the era. They got Joey Lawrence. They got
Jonathan Taylor
Thomas. They got, who else was in that mix? It was everybody.
Screech
was a big part of it.
Yeah, Dustin Diamond. Yeah.
Yeah, and like this is Jacob, you're too young for this, but Keona and Jonah remember back then, like before Sega did that, games came out like TBD. Like sometimes we come out in this store, and sometimes we come out in this store. Like there was no like release date, let alone a global launch date like Sonic 2. And Sega wanted it to be like the film industry because that would give it more respect and integrity, and also just the anticipation. Like there's a lot of
Sonic Tuesday, man. I remember Sonic Tuesday. Yeah, that was a big deal.
And when you look at the archival from around the world, it really was the kind of event that you expect. You had, a French kid. You had, Japan.
What did the French kids say?
I forget exactly the translation. Sonic is super.
Sonic is super.
It's my favorite.
Sonic is super. Yeah. And you actually can kind of see it in these kids' eyes how excited they are and how happy they are about it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I also liked, speaking of recordings of kids, I loved how you showed what was the dominating console at the time with home movies of kids opening their Christmas presents. First it was a Nintendo, and then it was a Genesis, and then the kids are freaking out, they're excited. And then it culminated in the PlayStation after they showed the E3 conference, after the guy went on the stage and he said, $2.99, and then they showed the kid unwrapping his gift, and there was the PlayStation. And then that was just kind of like it was like the final nail on Sega's coffin.
Steve Race, man, like what a gutsy individual. Like seriously going into the lobby of the hotel and deflating all the Sonic balloons.
Oh,
dude,
that was great.
That was just like, man,
we love Steve Race. He's one of our, I think he's fascinating character. One thing that got cut from the film is he is actually at Atari in marketing before all this, and in part of the Atari section he had sort of a nice role, but it didn't quite work out. But he's kind of been everywhere, He was at Atari, then he was at Sega, then he was at Sony, and obviously Reebok. He did that very controversial commercial that sort of launched the Reebok pump.
Yeah, the Reebok pumps. Oh my God.
Sometimes you just gotta, go for it, and that's what he does.
I love how he was like, and by the way, these pumps didn't do anything. If anything, they made the shoe less comfortable.
He was like, I deceived you, world. Thank you.
That's amazing.
He's had some of the best lines in the movie, too. The one about his wife. I forget the exact wording, but it was like, my wife always told me that I can't get a broken heart because I don't have one. Well, I guess that's just how I go about life.
What a character, though. I mean, it's just amazing. And then, of course, he led the most successful console launch of all time, pretty much, or the most successful console ever. So what does that tell you? It's.
Well, he did also get removed. He got fired, I believe, or let go about a month after the launch.
That's true. That is true. Yeah.
It's complicated. It was a great launch, but obviously the tensions were high.
Yeah, I'm sure. Given what he seemed to think of.
One of the larger themes of the movie is that Nintendo is in its own category. It plays a different game than Sony and Microsoft now, and Sega and Sony then, in that Sega and Sony both had really short-term thinking and had short-term successful bursts, but also were willing to fire or stop listening to people based on very small sample sizes. Where Nintendo, a lot of those people were still with the company when we began working on this. They've been with Nintendo over this long time. They were part of that inner circle, and there was less fickle decision making, for better or for worse. I mean, it did lead to some interesting things from Sega and Sony, but it
really was a case of the tortoise and the hare in this case. It was just like, Nintendo just took it slow and steady, and they eventually came out on top of, basically they beat Sega. And even with, like you said, even with Sony, it's like they're playing a different ball game anyway. So things are, Nintendo, and I have to say I haven't given a whole lot of credit to Nintendo, and I have to say that like Nintendo is great. I mean, they're a fantastic company, and I love them. And without them, we wouldn't have the video game industry as it is. So, all the credit goes to Nintendo, of course, for actually surviving through everything that they survived through, basically, and reigniting the flame of the console industry and the video game industry, after the crash. So
I always think about them, they obviously strayed away with the marketing and sort of some other aspects, Blood and Mortal Kombat, but you got to remember in 1995, they didn't rush N64 to market. They waited.
No.
They waited till they had the game. They waited and they steadied their course, and they were back to their focused ways of doing business. And that it just shows that even when they go off course, they're going to come back,
Yep.
And
that's also I would say, as case of like corporate responsibility. Like I'm sure that they would have sold a lot out of the gate, but they didn't want to sell a system that they couldn't deliver what they promised to their customers, and because they cared about the long-term brand value of Nintendo, and we're just going to take the quick buck for that quarter. They wanted to make sure that it was ready when it was ready, and that's a costly decision oftentimes, but also sort of a very respectable one.
Now, a quick question for you guys. Do you think that anyone at Nintendo or anyone at Sega still holds a grudge
1,000%.
over the console wars?
Yes, I would say yes. It's specific people more than others. I won't name names. Maybe but I think it's less of a grudge. It's a grudge, but also just you do have to remember though, this was also the best time of all their lives, business wise.
Yeah.
And so they look back at it fondly, but also like this was their time and they were shining, and then the people were poking them and, making it, you could only see color when you hit your head with a dead squirrel, and sort of, I think it wore on them more than anything. And, but again, they still all look fondly back on this time, even during the sort of the rougher stretches.
I love that though. I love the fact that you could see it on some of their faces. Like you could totally see the like, oh my God, I can't believe they did this to us or something, like it's really entertaining to see that basically. And I think that just both of them really, I think they gave it their all though, I have to say. Like maybe Sega a little bit more because they had to go from the bottom to the top, but but Nintendo, when they fought back, they were fierce. Fierce competition. It's all good for the consumer.
Well, that's the key. It all makes the games better, and it makes the systems better, and then consumer wins, and that's what's still going on today. Their fighting led to where we are today.
I love the fact that Microsoft just bought Bethesda as like, it's like a thumb in the eye of Sony right now. And I was one of those guys, by the way, who signed up for the PlayStation 5 pre-orders from Sony. Like I gave them my gamer ID. I never got an invitation from them, so I guess I'm too Xbox positive on Twitter or something. Because they never invited me back, and I'm going to hold them to that. I'm going to be like, hey, Sony, you guys never invited me back. What's up with that? But anyway, so they're vetting their consumers now, which is interesting. And I thought that the shot that Microsoft took at them when the pre-order fiasco was going on, and Microsoft was like, oh, by the way, we're going to put ours up for pre-order on this certain date. We'll tell you the exact date and time, and you guys won't have to do any guesswork. So, yeah.
I missed that. I missed the little jabs at each other.
Me too.
I think it's a good thing. As long as people are being respectful to each other. And
yeah.
I mean, we online doesn't help with that, but, don't be a jerk to another person. But a good old-fashioned, fun-spirited rivalry is a win for all, in my opinion.
Howard Lincoln doing the Roses Are Red poem, and and Tom Kalinske doing all the marketing and stuff. The blast processing was like my favorite thing ever, because it's so funny to hear them just say like, yeah, that was totally made up. So like I said, I'm such a huge fan of this stuff. I love it, and reading your book and seeing the documentary and everything, it just like it took me way back, and it just made me miss that. And I wondered, like, what would have happened if Tom Kalinske and everybody had continued at Sega? What would have happened with, like, the Saturn or the Dreamcast, which was actually, even more so than the Genesis, the Dreamcast is my favorite system of all time. Like, I love the games on that thing. But I can only imagine what would have happened had that team stayed on and actually marketed that console, because I think they would have had a winner, and I don't think they would have gotten out of the hardware market.
Well, it's a
I don't
great
think Japan wouldn't have let them though market the way they wanted to. It was
That's
over.
true.
It was over. Once sort of they started to become undermined, they couldn't use their tools to market things properly, and you
Yeah.
know, and it was over. That's why they left. You know, it
Yeah.
wasn't like these people were fired. They left because it was like their time was up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the Dreamcast is a great example because the scope of our film is really largely like 1985 to 1996, specifically 1990 to 96, the 16-bit battle. And so someone, you'd be like, oh, why did, it doesn't cover Sega actually exiting the hardware business. And that's true, technically, but that SOA, SOJ battle is such a big part of it because the Dreamcast, in my opinion, is the best Sega console ever made, or at least it's a great one. I don't know. I can count on one hand the number of people I've ever met in like the Dreamcast, and that's the console that made them leave the business. Like how, like when's the last time that someone did something really awesome and seemingly successful that like that, and they're like, that's why I'm quitting because it didn't go well.
It's so much better than the Saturn was. It just really was. But like the Saturn just dug them into a hole, I feel like, and then 32X didn't really help much either.
Yeah, we had touched more on 32X in another version of the edit, but it was sort of feeling redundant to the Saturn, so we kind of just used it as sort of part of the we called it the throwing things against the wall to see what would stick section of the Sega Rise.
Wow.
At least they went off with a bang after such a rocky. Is that like even they got off even they even got off on a pretty rocky start, like the Sega Master System. Was that notable? Was that a notable console in any way? Was that?
I think I've known people who had it and who loved it. So
really, it wasn't just the poor man's NES.
No,
it was. I mean,
had some good games.
Like it had a cult following, but it was a poor man's NES in terms of if you looked at any metrics of like how many consoles were sold, but it wasn't like an inferior NES. It wasn't like it really did have some cool games that would make somebody happy to own it.
But it didn't have Mario, and that's I think a real critical part of it.
Yeah.
And it didn't have a marketing team behind it. It was sort of a license situation.
I think there wasn't.
I actually think if I grew around during that time, I think I would have been a Sega guy. I honestly would. I would prefer the edgier Sega games. But the more cutting edge, the more the not quite as child friendly games of Sega. Like I would actually feel like I was a part of a new movement or something. Like which is what you guys were trying to push.
Felt like being part, and I think that Keona described it pretty well. That it was like you kind of said the next level without using those words. That for you it was like this more. It was different than what you were used to, and
it was. And then that marketing.
Apple had a similar marketing strategy as well. I feel like when you saw an Apple ad. And Apple, obviously incredible, it was like, okay, this is something different. This is a computer, but it's something else. You know? And that's, I think, what they were trying to do.
Yeah. It's the whole scrappy upstart thing, where you just have to you have to fight tooth and nail for every single point that you get, every single purchase that you get. And I think that can really light a fire under you. And then when you get up to the top, the hardest thing about it is maintaining that. Yeah. Because it's like our website too. It's like we had this bump in traffic because we did another interview, last week and stuff. And then, I'm just preparing myself because I'm going to be like, next week, the numbers aren't going to be that good, because it's just it was such a sudden thing. But it's the hardest thing is to maintain that. And I think that what Tom and the team were, had they been able to go on with their plans, I think they would have. But SOJ said no. So, what in your opinion was the thinking behind Nakayama turning sort of his back on Tom and everybody? Like, did he just have enough, or was it pressure from somebody else or from his people over there in Sega of Japan?
I wouldn't say it was Nakayama. It was portrayed as Nakayama as he was the face of SOJ, but Sega of Japan and most Japanese companies rule on consensus. And I think a lot of it was just the fact that there was a jealousy that sort of Genesis did not do well in Japan. It didn't do well at all. And so from what we understand, Nakayama and his, team were yelling at the Sega Japan guys, saying, "Why aren't you as good as the U.S.? They're crushing it. You're not."
Well, yeah.
And it breeds this sort of feeling of that this creates a bigger divide.
That pissed me off too, honestly.
And again, I don't think it was actually just Nakayama directly. I think especially early on, Nakayama, gave Tom the reins, but once everybody else chimes in, and for years of this, and who knows, maybe Tom's success was too much for him as well. But I just don't know.
Mm-hmm. I mean, of course, I'm asking you to speculate, but it's just like, it was such a thing that was so. It had built up, but also, you would think that when they were riding high, you would think that they would have let them just keep going because they were winning. At least in America, they were winning. But
there were a lot of moments. The Senate hearings, I think, were kind of embarrassing for Japan as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's not sort of what a Japanese company looks to get involved with, and this sort of that congressional hearing made them look pretty bad, and I think that's so I think there's a lot of little factors that added up,
I think it's also too, like, remember, like, the people that were making the decisions are businessmen and women, specifically Nakayama at the top. He had the final say or the biggest say, even if we shouldn't put all the blame at his feet.
Yeah.
It reminds me of like in sports. Like in sports, like you'll have an owner and he'll be, there'll be like a free agent quarterback, and then you have like an in-house quarterback, and if you're hearing 95% of the time from your in-house people, be like, oh no, he's the next Tom Brady, blah blah blah. And then you see someone else who's been doing well, but you're like constantly hearing one thing in your ear, and you're not a talent evaluator. Like Nakayama wasn't an engineer. He was obviously good at assessing these things, but it wasn't his expertise. You can be persuaded into making decisions that you don't have that expertise to make, and trusting those around you.
Yeah, true. And of course, Nakayama's brilliant. I mean, like, to even allow that to happen, I mean, he had to have some, he had a lot of foresight, basically, and he was able to bring about something that changed a lot of people's lives, essentially. Like, I consider this stuff life-changing for me personally. Like, had I not gotten into games and stuff, I don't know what I would be doing with my free time, frankly. But like, there's when it came down to it, I feel like there was a respect between the two companies, between Nintendo and Sega. Like, I know that there was probably a lot of animosity as well, but if Nintendo had not been respected by Sega, they would not have worked as hard as they did to overcome them, I think. Because, because of that whole, because like Nintendo was the big dog, and Sega knew it, and they respected it, and they knew that they had to compete at their level. They knew that they would not be able to just overtake them on their own. So in a way, it was like seeing two titans battle. And I miss that so much in terms of everything, really, in terms of the video game industry, and not to get tribal about it, because I mean, I'm pretty platform agnostic. The only console that I don't have right now is actually the Nintendo Switch, because I'm just happy with my Xbox and my PlayStation, and that's kind of where I get my gaming fix. But like, I don't know, like, it's just, apart from a few things like Microsoft buying Bethesda now and having more of a back catalog and hopefully some exclusives coming out, because Sony's just been kicking their butts in terms of that. But I miss the feeling of not knowing what was going to happen and sort of having that sense of mystery about, who was going to come out on top, which is something that you had in that console war era. And now you kind of just, everything is on Twitter. So
right,
seems less interesting to me now.
I just want to say, it was nice actually to look back at a time when video games were just something that you had fun with. Like, I mean, nowadays we have stuff like microtransactions and Gamergate and Gamergate, and and all these like people complain about the new Last of Us game, and how bad the writing in that game was, or yada yada. It was nice to see, like, from the perspective of a kid in the 80s or in the 90s, games were just, they were toys. And even in the news stories, they refer to these games as toys, basically. And that's kind of what they were. They were just something that kids did after school or on Saturday morning. And it was just I wish I grew up in that time. I really did, when there was no, internet for kids to scream at each other, at like the chat rooms and stuff, and like the forums, and yeah, it was this movie. It was a really refreshing slice of history. I think it was very
Same
nice.
for us. I mean, like we loved this story, but it was just very refreshing for us to sort of escape from 2019, or the past 5 years at times, the noise, and to just be lost in archival where it was generally optimistic and upbeat and non-nasty,
Yeah.
even if it was a negative thing, it didn't feel like there was this vitriol that you often feel today on the internet.
It was also important for us, even though there was this vitriol at times, it was fun to have sort of the animation help you take us into the world in a fun and lively way, and see people's reactions to the ridiculous things other people say, and just give it a lighthearted, because yes, it's a business story. This is a war story, but it's not a war story. This is a business story about obviously successful people, bringing products to market, but also about games and about the happiness it brought to people, and how these people were responsible for that in a very interesting way.
So did Shinobu Toyota, does he still work for Sega, or can you say, or not?
No, he does not. He hasn't worked there since he was the last to leave, I believe, right? Blake, what year did he leave?
Yeah, I don't know exactly. He actually currently works with Unity. It does game.
Is he the one who still lives in that Comfort Inn hotel room?
Yeah.
Yes.
That was what I was going to ask about. I was going to be like,
has the room there.
He's still in that room. Wow, that's amazing.
We interviewed him in that room.
Jeez.
Yeah.
And he pays for that room every day?
Well, I think he has probably a deal.
He has like an annual rate or something. But yeah, he's like still pays for the room.
It's because it's 7 minutes from the airport. His family lives in Texas. He's
there
in
you
Japan
go.
and San Francisco.
Perfect.
7 minutes from the airport.
Perfect.
Very convenient. I'd call it more of a pied-a-terre.
All right, guys. So I know you guys have to go pretty soon, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. But could you, just to clarify, so there is a TV series in the works?
There is. Blake and I are both executive producers on it. Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg are behind it.
That's awesome.
And it is the current script version we are absolutely obsessed with. Mike Rizzolio, who's an amazing Hollywood writer, wrote it. It's incredible. It really captures the spirit of what we love about the story. And also, the Point Grey, Seth Rogen, Evan Goldberg guys love it as well. And it's pretty rare you find a script that, takes somebody else's material and then does it justice, and everybody likes it all across the board. So we're really excited. We'll see what happens. Obviously, the CBS Viacom merger happened, slowed things down along with the COVID crisis. So give us a little more time, and hopefully we'll have something out.
Awesome.
Can't wait to see it. I'll be the first to check it out.
And if you guys ever want to come back on our show and just talk about the TV series again and just hype it up, we're willing to do that. Absolutely. So
Excellent.
This is a
Sounds good. We're
pleasure.
down.
This is an absolute pleasure having you guys on. So can I ask you, just to wrap things up here, where can everybody find you online if they want to get in touch?
I'm on Twitter at Blake J. Harris NYC.
And I'm Twitter at Jonah Tulis. JONAHTULIS.
Awesome. All right. And Jacob, where can everybody find you?
You can find me on Twitter. I'm Joe Crable, KREHBIEL. And I am also on Facebook, Jacob Crable, KREHBIEL again. And you can also find me in the Renegade Pop Culture Facebook group.
All right. And that group is facebook.com/group/RPC42. You can find me on Instagram at Neoplasmic24, on Twitter at Keona Tang. That's KEONATANG. Also, the Renegade Pop Culture official Twitter, which is at Ren Pop Culture. And that's about it, guys. All right. So we will see you next time. And remember, Genesis does what Nintendo don't. Oh, I'm sorry. That's for the other guy. That was for the guy before Tom. So just remember, guys, welcome to the next level and play it loud.
Oh, remember this. Sega!
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 All right.